Hello, STEM girlies. Welcome back to Computer Science, the podcast that connects ambitious and driven girls just like you to the trailblazing women of STEM. So, our guest for today is an incoming freshman into Stanford University, Carolyn He. A recent grad from the Academy for Mathematics, Science, and Engineering, Carolyn plans to study data science and sustainability at Stanford. So, whether you're exploring a career in STEM or business, or just looking for inspiration, this episode is packed with wisdom you won't want to miss. So, grab your drinks, grab your matcha, and let's get ready to hear all about Carolyn's incredible journey, experiences, and insights from high school. So, Carolyn, let's just dive right in. Could you start by sharing with our viewers a little bit about yourself, your work, and what you've majorly been involved with in high school?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's so much fun to be on today. Absolutely love the experience to absolutely yap about my experiences, I suppose. But throughout high school, I was mostly involved in the sustainability and STEM advocacy spaces. I would really separate it into two pools that did have some intersections, but predominantly I was focused on environmentalism and sustainability. I was involved in a lot of environmental youth councils to that end. I also had my own nonprofit where we helped schools reduce their printing. And then on the STEM advocacy end, I was involved with the organization Women in STEM, which I guess is pretty pertinent to your podcast. And I was also a mentor for young girls in my area through the Engineer Girl program. We would host STEM outreach activities every Friday.
That's amazing. I'm so excited to hear more about these later on in the podcast. But how did you end up venturing into these STEM fields?
So I can't say that there's a definitive moment. I would more so call it a collection of little moments that kind of accumulated into something larger. We can even maybe we can go back to 4th grade. I had a teacher who was really encouraging of my studies. Her name was Mrs. Murti. Shout out if whatever random universe we're in, you're listening to this. But she was the one who taught me how to believe in my own voice. That sounds really sappy, but what you have to understand is that when I was younger, I was a very, very shy kid. I was always the one in the back of the class, never had my hand raised. I would have a question in my mind, but out of fear of being incorrect or out of fear of being heard weirdly, I just wouldn't speak up. And so Mrs. Marucci really encouraged me to get out of my shell, but she also brought me into these smaller groups. We had different math groups in my class, but she introduced me to those groups, and being in those smaller environments helped me speak up a little bit more. They felt more intimate, and I felt safer to be able to share my own opinions. And so it started with math, later became my first language in a sense. And to this day, math is largely how I help define the world around me. I find that data really helps me understand the patterns in the world around me. So I was involved in a lot of STEM research as well throughout high school, but mostly it's just harnessing the power of data to drive change.
I love that. And especially like you said, when you were little, you were a little more shy. I think as we progress and we learn more things, the way that we end up acquiring more confidence is so cool. And the more you can speak out about yourself, whenever somebody's in the back of the class, it's hard to speak up. But just like learning how to do that, especially receiving support from mentors, that's so incredible. Now, you talked about doing some math as well. And STEM is associated with being smart, logical, hardworking. These are traits that we hear about from everyone. But in your opinion, what are some underrated or less talked about qualities that you think are just as essential for success in the STEM fields?
I think first, the ability to understand, but also second, your capacity for humility. So I can kind of explain where I've kind of experienced both qualities throughout high school. The first, the ability to understand, I truly define that as being able to empathize with others on a deeper level. Because, like, yes, you can complete the math problem faster than everyone else. But if you're not able to properly convey that to other people, then you're not really helping anyone at all. I think the thing about being a scientist is that it's as much as being able to do the work as the ability to properly convey that work. And a lot of the times, that kind of empathetic communication requires just that empathy and understanding. So even when I'm thinking about my work from like a higher level, It really does take a lot to first to be able to understand the communities that you're serving before you're more able to tailor your work for them. And the second is humility, but I mostly see that as the ability to learn from everybody and everyone. And chances are you're not going to be the smartest in the room ever, and if you're doing it right, nor should you ever be the smartest in the room. So it really does take, I think, an important mindset to be able to open your mind to different ideas from everybody, but also to be able to put yourself in a position where you're open to learning from anyone. And I think that's brought me to where I am just as much as I can work hard and keep my head down.
I love that. I love how you said ability to understand and communicate your ideas. You can be the smartest, like, math genius, science whiz, but if you can't explain your ideas, and even if you're, like, creating an app or you're creating this prototype and it's just the most incredible, groundbreaking thing, but if you can't pitch that idea to actual investors, venture capitalists that are gonna support your idea, then it's no use. Communication is just so important. I like that you said you're not gonna be the smartest in the room, and really you wanna be putting yourself in the spaces where other people are better than you so you can learn from them, you can be inspired. Definitely agree with you there. Now, talk to us a little bit about your entrepreneurship ventures. I just want to know more about what you did in high school. So I know you started this organization called Anywhere, Any Square. Can you share a little bit about this with us?
Yeah, so I've always been a huge thrifter. I really enjoy the process of like going and then seeing what you can find on a specific day. It's always like a nice combination of fate, but also like your purposeful actions. And I just really enjoy that balance. But I recently got my younger sister into thrifting as well. So last summer we went on a trip and we noticed that there were just racks and racks and racks of t-shirts. And we were thinking like realistically, there's no way that they can sell everything. So from there, we kind of went into a deeper investigation of where clothing ends up after the thrift store. We tend to think of these thrift stores and charitable organizations as like being the path to a next life for articles of clothing, but the truth is, even afterwards, a lot of the clothing just ends up in landfills or what these stores called trash bills, which is just a glorified euphemism for these landfills. So from there, my sister and I were thinking about how we could take these t-shirts that otherwise weren't going to be sold, that thrift stores actually operate on a schedule such that after a certain amount of time, the clothing that isn't sold is just like carted off. So we would take that clothing that's about to be carted off and we decided to turn that into something called reclaimed yarn. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of reclaimed yarn, but what it is you take a t-shirt and you can cut it up in such a fashion that you ultimately develop a spool of very similar yarn material. And so from there, we were able to kind of knit and crochet that into small plushies and otherwise really small knickknacks. And for us, what began as a hobby also quickly turned into a business because many people around us were interested in purchasing them. So that's kind of where Anywhere, Any Square started. But what I really hope it'll become is a movement of being able to more creatively underutilized or frequently overlooked materials.
I love that, and I never knew how exactly thrift stores work, so I never knew they had the cycle of clothing that they bring in and they take out, so that was really interesting to learn about. I hope more people can understand that you can be sustainable in little aspects of your life and you may not notice, but there's so many opportunities there for you to just promote a greener world, so I absolutely love this initiative that you did. Now, I know you also founded this organization called A Sustainable Future, so love all the sustainability. Can you talk to us about this as well?
Yeah, so ASF really started as a research project. It was never meant to grow larger than investigating my school's printing post COVID. I had kind of realized that even after the pandemic, we were using inordinate amounts of paper, even when we had kind of developed the capabilities to switch to virtual learning. So afterwards, I was again curious to investigate exactly how much we were printing and how we could kind of reduce that usage. So I launched an investigation into my school's printing using our school's printer reports. And what I found is that we had not only been printing just as much, we were actually printing more post pandemic. And so from there, I was also curious to see how our usage compared to other schools in the area. So the project slowly became bigger and bigger, and then ultimately other schools wanted to join in too. We started devising strategic print reduction plans for schools. And since then, we've kind of been able to expand our impact to helping both schools and students reduce their high school's printing. Students through the process that I had once undertook of researching then implementing paper reduction plans, and schools just from a perspective of being able to manage and monitor the resource use more efficiently.
I think about this all the time as well. Like, there's one class, say it has like 20, 30 students, and each person uses like, say, even two sheets of paper out of all the different classes, like seven, eight classes a teacher teaches, and then the multiple, like 200 school days in a year. That's a lot of paper. And I always think about this, and that's so cool that you actually launched an investigation about it. So, what are some of the things that you found help with paper reduction?
It's really the small things that you wouldn't normally consider. So we found that schools' capabilities to reduce print often vary by both their socioeconomic background, but also just from what kind of state they're from. We have found that really anything can be productive and efficient as long as it's being implemented mindfully. So in my school, for instance, we shifted our printing to a centralized system, meaning printers were taken out of teachers' classrooms and instead they had to go to a common hub to print. So, like the faculty workroom or library. And we found that teachers were not only making less trips to the printer, which is logical, but each time they actually went, they printed less because simply the act of having to go out of their way to print made them second guess exactly how much they needed to in the first place. We've also found in other schools that really implicit changes, like making sure that double sided defaults are enabled, also helps reduce print. In other cases, it can also just be teachers administering surveys to their students at the beginning of the school year, asking whether they'd like to do things virtually or on paper. That also really helps. But mostly it's been embracing technology. I think it can be quite scary to some educators, and I totally empathize with that. But the truth is, I think technology in education is more or less here to stay. And if we can't adapt to it, then most likely people are going to get left behind, not in a way that should be happening. And obviously, you can't fully replace the tactile experience of pen on paper in certain cases. And to that end, there also have been emerging technologies. I don't know if you're familiar with Rocketbook notebooks or simply like iPads. There are definitely alternative note taking forms out there that are becoming more heavily utilized. And so, if schools are able to kind of look at that as an opportunity rather than as a detriment, we can really start to reduce printing even more from there.
That is so true. There are so many different apps out there that you can actually take notes much more efficiently on. And I love using my iPad to take notes on. It's so much easier to do it that way. But also, like using pen and paper, sometimes that can be more helpful because it's right there, it's physical in front of you. So I've also found just using a notebook or like a journal to take notes is a lot better than using like scrap pieces of paper because you can use that journal for other things and you can kind of reuse notebooks. But with paper, paper gets lost. It's so easy to recycle paper, right? Or just throw it away. And so that's why we end up having more paper usage. Now let's segue into research. So, what was it like being a research intern at, I know you researched at Virginia Tech as well as the University of Maryland. And then you were actually invited to the World Science Festival. So I love all of this research aspect of you. Can you tell us about each of the three things and just what they entailed?
Yeah, so I can kind of walk you through them one by one. So at Virginia Tech, I was studying sustainable plantation management in Brazil. And so what we were doing is kind of analyzing how quickly trees grew and whether the plantation strategies that the plantation owners were using were actually effectively producing the same amount of output relative to the seasonal changes. And then at the University of Maryland, we were developing geospatial tools to monitor wildfires and specifically burn masks for those areas in sub-Saharan Africa. And what I found from those experiences is that the same types of tools can be used in vastly different ways. So both of those projects appeal to my methodical nature in very different senses. What was ultimately interesting is how by using the same interfaces, we could produce vastly different tools for vastly different purposes. And then on the latter end, at the World Science Festival, I actually had the opportunity to take a lot of interesting courses and see how, again, like math can be such a versatile tool. So, not only is the foundation for like space time dilation, but it also has very strong connections to psychological implications for our brain, like how trauma is processed, how we form new memories. It's just been a super interesting and fulfilling experience overall. It's definitely hurt my brain in more cases than one, but also, again, super fulfilling.
That's amazing. And so now with everyone who does research, I always like to ask them, how did you end up getting your first research opportunity? Because once you have one, you can use that as like a resume builder. But your first one, did you cold email? Did you use your connections? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. So my very first research experience ever, I think I got it in my freshman summer, but that was just a very lucky cold email. This was a field I ultimately found that I did not have an interest in pursuing, but to that end, I would just recommend to send as many cold emails as you can because to know what you don't want to do is just as valuable as knowing what you maybe are interested in as well. So this research internship, we were looking at blockchain vulnerabilities, and this was around the time that I think FTX really imploded in on itself. So to be able to kind of relate current events to the research that I was doing from a more like I guess objective lens, that was a very interesting experience. Ultimately, I did find out that I wasn't super interested in like decentralized finance, but now that I have some of that experience under my belt, I kind of at least know my way around a couple of terms. And again, as you mentioned, it really does open up later doors because I didn't exactly get my next research internship from that one, but I did find out what goes into a good cold email, like, template. So, you win some, you lose some.
That's amazing. I feel like even when you're doing something that you don't end up enjoying at the end, it's such a nice learning experience because first of all, you learn something you didn't know before, and then you also learn that you don't actually like this. So if another opportunity like this comes in the future, you can kind of work your way around that and maybe you can find a different way of pursuing that opportunity in a way that actually aligns with what you like. So it definitely helps you realize your interests a lot more. Now, with this amazing, insanely busy life that you've led in high school, how did you and how do you still balance your time between your school, extracurriculars, and then your personal, your friends, and your family time?
So to start, I'd kind of like to give a little caveat. And if it's that if you don't enjoy what you're doing, then it's not going to be sustainable. So before you try to think about how you can slot everything into your Google Calendar, which is a very useful tool, by the way, I would first think about whether those items actually deserve to be in your Google Calendar. Because I want to tell you, like, girl, you do not need to take on everything. A lot of cool opportunities will come your way, and you can say yes to them, but that also does not mean you should be saying yes to every single one of them. Your time is so valuable. And so before you take on something new, I would ask yourself whether it's something you really want to do or whether it's something you want to do because it sounds cool to other people. The other thing I would recommend is that once you start to derive joy from your activities, a lot of things will kind of like slot into place for you because you're finding that you're making the time for those activities. So, on that note, time management is as much like being practical and having the tools to properly manage your time as it is the internal motivation to actually take on all of those opportunities. Tools that I found really helpful for time management, was first Google Calendar. Do not mean to make this like a shameless advertisement for them, but truly it's so nice to be able to kind of look at your tasks for the day and for the week from like an eagle's eye point of view, and it helps you prioritize what really matters. Like for instance, if a certain time block is a little bit too long for this one task or chore, you can kind of like move things around and it just helps you visualize your day. I'm a very visual type of person, so I found personally that worked for me. For other people, simply having consistency also helps for them. My policy was I get my work done throughout the day, then Friday and Sunday were my rest days or days that I would plan all of my social activities. So just knowing that you can give yourself times for breaks and giving yourself grace and knowing that you actually have time for breaks is so important to make sure that you don't burn out. The final thing that I did was I scheduled 15-minute blocks just for myself every single night, and these were non-negotiables. No matter what I was doing, no matter where I was traveling, I would take 15 minutes right before bed to unwind, to stretch, just to reconnect with myself and see how I was feeling. And oftentimes they were lengthened, but at the very least, I always had those 15 minutes no matter what. Oh, and then like this is, I guess, as a sidebar, a very honorary mention, but take lots of hot girl walks if it's nice out. I found that reconnecting outside really helped me mentally. I was someone who had seasonal depression and didn't know that she had it until she was fully outside again. But I think walking outside is really nice because one, it gets you physically moving and also helps kind of stir those mental cogs. But two, you can also do a lot while you're walking as well. Like listen to a podcast, read an audiobook, have a call with the friend that you haven't caught up with in a really long time. I think oftentimes people kind of see like taking I don't wanna say taking walks is, like, being selfish and, like, coveting time for yourself, but ultimately, it can be a very versatile tool as well, and just to know that you have that time to yourself is so important.
For sure. A lot of times, whenever we're taking breaks, we tend to take very visual breaks, like either we're scrolling on our phone or we're like watching something. But when you take walks, it's all audio, right? You either have your AirPods or like your earplugs or whatever in. And then when you're doing more of that audio type of task, it's just, for me, it's so much more relaxing. Because if you're listening to a podcast, your eyes can still like take in the natural beauty wherever you're walking. I love taking walks. I always listen to a really good podcast. So totally do that. That's a really great tip. Highly recommend to everyone. And Google Calendar, I know you mentioned this earlier. It's just the best tool ever. I love Google Calendar and Apple Calendar. And they sync together. So it's just so perfect. I love getting that overview, like you said, of the week, of the month, of your day. You can like totally plan it out. And you can use like different colors too to see like what type of tasks you're doing. So absolutely love that. What is one opportunity when you look back at your high school years that you think you kind of leveraged to help get you to where you are today?
This is a really good question, and it definitely calls for some introspection. Off the top of my mind, I probably would say my print reduction initiative, but not for the reasons why you might initially think. I think from that, I kind of discovered my holy trinity of like environmental advocacy, statistics, and community. And it really taught me how to keep on going even when I thought everything was kind of crumbling apart. So I mentioned earlier that I never really was meant to grow larger than a casual investigation, but I was finding like as we were scaling, a lot of that scaling was done retroactively. So there were very much times when I had to stop and be like, Carolyn, what on earth are you doing right now? Like, what is happening? Why is everything moving so quickly? And amidst the chaos, I kind of had to reckon both with myself, but also understand that sometimes, like, you just need to keep on going. From ASF, I really learned how to keep on going even when you think doors are closed, or on the flip side, that everything is hurtling past you at lightning speed. So I learned how to be resilient from that. I learned how to thank those who keep an open door, and I really just learned what it means to be a part of a community that cares about issues as deeply as you do. And from that end, I was able to kind of search for more communities where I could replicate something similar and feel connected to others who were passionate about the same things that I was passionate about.
Amazing. For somebody just starting high school, what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give them if they were just starting high school?
Don't take anything too seriously. In retrospect, I realized I had invested a lot of time and effort into areas where I maybe didn't need to, and I would have gotten to the same place anyway. And this also applies on multiple levels. Like, first, don't take everything else too seriously, but also don't take yourself too seriously. Have lots of fun. um, yeah, so remember to save those weekends for fun social events, but also just remember that nothing is ever that deep. Like, a bad grade can feel, like, really like, it can make you really distraught in the moment, but ultimately, it's just like a ripple in a much larger pond. Remember that you are the accumulation of all of your life's experiences and all of your life's mistakes, not necessarily defined by a single moment. So even when things start to feel really serious at a certain point, just remember that life will continue and that it ultimately probably isn't that deep. Oh, and the final thing is to respect and protect your own time. I kind of touched upon this earlier, but when I started high school, I really, really wish that I knew exactly how valuable my time was. For context, I played field hockey and I fenced throughout my freshman and sophomore years. And in a positive sense, it kind of helped me realize what I did not want to do. But more so, I had kind of wished that I knew in advance. First, what sunk cost fallacy is, but second, that just because I've started an activity does not mean I need to go through entirely. And that if you find the activities that really matter to you, you will keep on going. And that if you're constantly debating whether you should stay or whether you should leave, it probably is very much a signal that you should leave because you know exactly what you want to do. And to protect your time means that you can devote it to other things that are even more important to you.
Definitely. When you take a step back and reflect on how the activity or the place that you're in, that space is making you feel, it definitely gives you a lot more insight on if that's even right for you in the first place. And I think knowing the time, like when it's time to stop, is just so crucial. because you don't want to be spending your time in something that isn't bringing you complete joy, right? Obviously, it's not going to bring you joy 100% of the time, but I always like to think like 80% of the time, if it's bringing you joy, that's good. And hey, if it's not, you can stop. Like, that's totally okay. So that's
Exactly.
really, really,
Mary Kondo it up.
yes. I love Mary Kondo so much. With any amount of success, there's going to be challenges and failures that are part of this. Challenges and failures are like the backbone to success. So, can you share a time where you faced a significant obstacle in your journey and then how you ended up overcoming that?
To contemplate how much I want to give away. I can almost point to something a little bit, maybe more recent. It was also very like interpersonal. I really regret again like not giving myself the grace to be able to quit certain things. I mentioned earlier that I had quit field hockey, but to me, that was definitely not an easy decision because first I felt like I invested so much time in it that I kind of had to keep on going, but also felt like the team depended on me as well. Like if you're playing field hockey, you're part of a team. You cry, run, and scream together. You like work, play, and like laugh together. It's very much almost like being part of a family where everyone knows how they function within the larger whole. And so before I quit, I kind of felt like I was not just failing myself, but also the broader team, and that I think had made the decision a lot harder than it really needed to be. But ultimately, I've found that like quitting field hockey is not necessarily a recognition of my failures, but more so recognizing my humanity. Like, I'm only one girl. I can't do it all. Not to mention, like, when I think about what I admire most about successful leaders, it's that they know exactly who they are, what they stand for, but also where their boundaries are. So, again, like, you don't need to do everything. Sometimes it is okay to just set the boundary and tell yourself, like, this is the line that I will not cross. But also, like, you can change those lines as well, and that's completely okay. So just knowing that again, like single moments do not define your worth as a person, but also that you're able to take steps back. And that's not necessarily recognizing that you're failing either.
For sure. I love that you touched on boundaries. I think the more like ruthless your boundaries are, the more likely you are to actually end up getting somewhere and achieving what you wanted to. Because if you always let other people take up your time, if you let activities or just things that you did not even want to be a part of take up your time, that's obviously not putting you in the right direction. But again, when you're in a sports team or just really any place that requires a team, it can feel kind of disheartening to leave that because you have all these people that they kind of holded you there, they expected you to be there, but really if you're not finding joy there, that's completely okay, and they should be able to understand, and if they're not, then that's on them. You need to be able to set that boundary for yourself and just know that you can still hang out with these people, you can still support them in different avenues, but maybe this certain avenue isn't correct. Like, one of the best things you can have, just being able to take a step back and realizing that, okay, this is now it's time to stop. I want to pivot here. I want to segue into phone usage. So, resisting the temptation to spend away full blocks of time on our phones can be a struggle for many. So, what are some tips you would give to your younger self for prioritizing just getting work done?
This is so funny. And this is also what I would point to in terms of time management. Lock your room or lock your phone in another room and just like leave it there. You'll find that when you're off your phone, you can really concentrate on what matters a lot more. But also my other thing is like not only your phone's distracting, but they're very much addictive. So I would allot myself like I understood that I still needed like my horizontal time every single night. So as part of my 15 minutes after I stretched, sometimes I would just go on and I'd give myself a little horizontal time. And I still got my daily fix of whatever I needed. The other thing I would recommend is not only to lock your phone away, but also set time limits on your phone in general. So by limiting the amount of time you're giving yourself on your phone, you'll find that you really like don't need to use it as often. Like for instance, right now I have a 30-minute time limit on my phone for YouTube every single day. And sometimes I don't even use up all of it. Sometimes I do. But at the end of the day, sometimes all I really need is those 30 minutes, and that's honestly good for me.
I also do this all the time. Just putting your phone in a different room or even in a drawer. When it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So then you're a lot less likely to scroll and then to just be like, let me check my text and my friend texts me back. If it's out of your sight, then you're more likely to focus on the task at hand. That's an amazing tip. This does bring us to the last question of the podcast. If you could have a heart to heart, girl to girl conversation with a girl just starting off in the STEM or business fields, what final piece of advice would you give her?
Your soft skills are just important as your hard skills. The ability to look for mentors within the STEM fields and the STEM spaces is going to be so crucial for your long lasting success. Like, again, like you can be the smartest math whiz out there, you can be the best coder out there, but ultimately it's by developing those interpersonal networks that you're going to get a lot further and that you're going to feel a lot more connected and supported as well. I wish I had started searching for a community a lot earlier. I had always kind of had like a bootstrapping mentality, like, oh, I can do this by myself, like I can bring myself to where I need to be. But ultimately, it was by connecting with communities like Women in STEM, like serving other young girls through Engineer Girl, that I realized it's really being part of a larger whole that gave me more purpose rather than trying to do everything by myself. Not to mention, there are just so many like cool, badass women out there who would love to share about their experiences with you. So definitely go looking for those relationships, but also understand that you're never truly alone once you have those networks.
For sure. And that's the whole point of computer science, anyways, to highlight these incredible women. And when you hear experiences from these other women that are experiencing the same things as you or even different things, but the end, like kind of things that you have to tell yourself, like the habits or just the way that you carry yourself is similar, regardless of what field you're in. Now, this does close our podcast. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for spending time out to do this and being so open and authentic with us today. All your stories and all your tips were absolutely amazing, and it was such a privilege to have you on Computer Chance. And to all our listeners, thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with a friend, and leave us a review. It helps us connect more ambitious girls to amazing STEM role models. Until next time, keep reaching for the stars and chasing those dreams. See you soon on Computer Science.